Just after the Gospels in the Christian Bible is the book of Acts. Now, the book of Acts chronicles the beginnings of the Christian church. Something that happens early in this text is the apostles realize that the church has grown too big for them to handle all of the day-to-day work that needs to be done. So they choose 7 men of good reputation, and they ordain these 7 as Christianity's first deacons. So, what happened to them next? Deacons are a familiar part of the church today. In Orthodox services, you'll hear them doing most of the chanting for the clergy, and they will be the ones reading the gospel every single Sunday. The deacons' vestments still reflect the origins of the diaconate, or the order of deacons, in that first century moment in the book of Acts. The deacon wears something called an orarion, which is a stole draped over his left shoulder and over his left arm. He has to wear this in the service because this is the sign of his position. He cannot serve without it. During special moments in the liturgy, or when he wants to draw attention to something, or when he is leading a litany, he takes this orarion in his right hand. This orarion, this stole, draped over his left shoulder, over his left arm, and at parts of the service wrapped around his waist, represents a towel used for cleaning, for helping, for work. This is the job they have had since the first 7 deacons were ordained, the job of serving the people of Christ's church. Now, because all priests were once deacons, some Orthodox are under the impression that deacons, or the diaconate, is a training ground for the priesthood or a preparation for it, but this is not the case. The diaconate is an entirely separate job and separate position. Only deacons can become priests, but not all deacons are called to be priests, and good deacons are the backbones of many strong communities around the world. Next time you're at a big cathedral during a massive service where there's lots of bishops and priests and deacons, watch the deacons, because it is the deacons that keep things running smoothly. They continue the work of their 7 forebears from the 1st century. So, what happened to the 7 first deacons? The Bible records that when the apostles wanted to ordain these deacons, they asked the people to nominate those that they considered the right people for the job. The apostles agreed with those nominations. They picked 7 men that were full of wisdom, full of the Holy Spirit, and men of good reputation. They were ordained to look after the day-to-day work of the church. Their names are Stephen, Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicolas. The most famous of these is obviously Stephen. His story is recorded in the book of Acts. We have done a short episode on him already, but you can read it in Acts chapter 6 and 7. Stephen was taken before a court where he gave a very good defense of Christianity. He saw in a vision Jesus standing at the right hand of God, but the council would not hear of it, and he was condemned to death, and he was stoned to death outside. He became Christianity's first ever martyr. The name Stephen means crown, and to this day we will say of Christian martyrs that they have been crowned with martyrdom. The next deacon on the list is Philip. Philip is the only other deacon that has extra story given in the scriptures. After the death of Stephen, he leaves Jerusalem and is involved in a few interesting stories that are recorded. The most famous one is in regards to him being called by God to talk to an Ethiopian on the road. Now, he meets this Ethiopian man who is reading the scriptures, and Philip says to him, "Do you know what you're reading?" And the man says, "How can I understand it unless someone explains it to me?" Now, this statement of both wisdom and humility is the basis for how we should approach the reading of scriptures as Christians to this day. It isn't just a case of picking up the book, it is a case of allowing ourselves to be explained what this means, to follow the teachings of the church, of the apostles, so that we are reading this text correctly. Philip and the Ethiopian have an excellent conversation, which results in the Ethiopian being baptized. Philip went on to be a bishop of a city in Asia Minor and lived into old age. The next deacon on the list is Prochorus. Now, he has no extra mention in the book of Acts. He is, however, a well-known figure in the early church. He went on to accompany Peter in many of his different travels, and later accompanied the Apostle John, the evangelist, the author of the Gospel. Prochorus was actually exiled to the island of Patmos with the Apostle John, and many icons of the Apostle John the Evangelist actually show Prochorus next to him, writing down the words of the Apostle John. Prochorus was John's scribe. After the death of the Apostle John, Prochorus would end up back on the mainland, where he lived and worked in Antioch. He was eventually martyred for the faith there. We don't know very much about the next deacon on the list, Nicanor, and that is because he died very early in his ministry. He was, like Stephen, stoned to death, along with a number of other Christians. This is possibly alluded to in Acts chapter 8 verse 1. According to some stories, he and these other Christians were actually killed on the same day as Stephen, later in the day. The deacon Timon would eventually go on to become a bishop in Arabia in modern-day Syria. He too suffered martyrdom for the faith. According to the stories, he was thrown into a furnace to be killed. Now, some stories say he actually survived that miraculously, but later on went on to be killed through crucifixion. Either way, he's another martyr of the early Christian church. We don't know much else about his ministry. We also don't know very much about the ministry of Parmenas. Parmenas traveled around Asia Minor, working as a missionary, and eventually settled in Macedonia. There, he too was crowned with martyrdom during the persecutions by the Emperor Trajan. He died at the end of the 1st century. The final name on the list is Nicolas of Antioch. Now, you would think that the first Christian mention of a person named Nicolas would be a good one. Nicolas is a name later associated with the great saint of Myra. But it's not so. Here the story changes dramatically. Somewhere between the writing of the book of Acts and the writing of the book of Revelation, Nicolas went completely off the rails. He delved into and created heresies that really bothered the church. In the book of Revelation, John twice condemns the heresy. Once he thanks the church in Ephesus for standing against it, and he criticizes another church for giving too much ground to the Nicolaites and the heresy of Nicolaism. This must have been a strange thing for John and Prochorus to be writing. The feeling of betrayal in truth by a man that they once called a friend. The early church fathers, including Irenaeus and Hippolytus, write about the hatred of this heresy, in the shock that someone who had everything going for him and was trusted by the apostles could so choose the wrong path. Now, this twist in the tale, for me, makes the entire story feel even more relatable, because what we have here is a clear display of choice. The apostles did not make a mistake in the ordaining of these 7 deacons. They really knew these 7 men were men of good reputation, men of good faith. They chose them well. Now, one of them chose to follow his own self into error. Thankfully, the heresy did not last very long in the church, and its end was brought about fairly quickly. But the story and the lesson still remains. The other 6 deacons chose to follow Christ. It wasn't an automatic thing. They made the choice every day to follow Christ and to serve him. The lesson in these 7 deacons for us is that you might be considered wise and holy by people who are wiser and holier than you. You might be a respected Christian, but you still have the free will to drop all of that and go into error, and you have the free will to follow the beautiful example of the 6 righteous deacons to serve God and his church here on earth. Thank you very much for watching and for returning to Patristix in this new series of episodes. This is not the first time that deacons will be mentioned. We will be doing episodes where we will look at the different orders of clergy, the priests, the deacons, and their jobs in the church at some point down the road. There's obviously a lot of topics that we can cover on this channel. The tea that we are starting the year with is Xinxia green tea. I was given this for Christmas. It's delicious. Something important I'm going to say, because not enough people know this. When you make black tea, you need boiling water, 100 degrees. When you make green tea and some variants of herbal teas, you don't want boiling water, you want water that's about 80 degrees, because boiling water will burn the leaves and lose some of the taste. So while we're giving you early church knowledge here, we might as well give you some knowledge of how to make tea better.